Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today, lucky enough to be joined by Halen and Andrew. He is all about how do we scale over into the US. He's an Aussie guy that's gone over to America, living in Florida, of all places. Nice and warm, I imagine, over there, Halen. And helping businesses from India, Australia, and also Singapore get out to the US. And one of the things when I spoke to him and met him previously was all about how do we automate sales. Fascinating conversation. Technology is obviously growing and scaling with us as we speak, and Halen's right at the cusp of that from a sales technology piece. Thank you for coming on and talking all about sales tech and how we might get into the US from down below, technically, in the world.
It's
Thanks,
a
Halen.
long travel,
It
but
is,
make
definitely.
it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you ended up starting out Scale, mate.
Yeah, no worries. Good to be here. So, Australian guy, as you can tell, I haven't lost the accent yet. Been here for 3 years, but hopefully that doesn't go because it's a little bit unique. There's not too many
Probably
Australians.
helps in the environment to have that accent. It starts a conversation,
It's
right?
a little bit memorable, you know. Hopefully they can remember me just from the voice, not the face. But yeah, been here for 3 years almost. I grew up on the Central Coast, so just hour and a half outside of Sydney. Moved around a little bit, but actually grew up in Bensville, kind of near Terrigal area, if anyone knows that spot. Worked in Sydney pretty much straight away. I was in college for a year, and then got a full-time job cold calling, as every person in sales does. They've got to cut their teeth.
I did a job in cold calling, bloody hated it. Never went back.
Oh man, it's
It's a
it's brutal,
fascinating
but
role. It is
it's fun.
brutal, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
fun. If you like a little adrenaline rush, a rush of getting, a sale on the spot or booking a meeting or something, then it's probably good. That's why I liked it anyway.
yeah.
So started doing that, was for a media company. Then I quickly analyzed like where I wanted to go from there, and I landed on, do I go into finance or do I go into tech? They're the two large industries where you can cut your teeth and build a career. I ended up choosing tech. My dad was actually in tech, so I had someone to bounce questions off at least about that. I studied finance and then went into tech. Got a job in a cybersecurity company, again, cold calling, did very well there. That's when I got promoted into a full-blown like account executive role, selling face-to-face over Zoom, bit of a mix. This was way pre-COVID time, so Zoom was kind of a thing, kind of not. Like, I actually remember everyone would be on Zoom, but no one would have their camera on. No one would ever be face to
Very
face. Like,
different, wasn't it, back then? And then COVID
yeah,
hit and it's all changed. And it's been
yeah,
I think it's a good change. It's closed the borders. It's enabled
yeah,
us to have a conversation with you, which 5 years ago probably wouldn't happen.
yeah,
Reality is it would have been difficult at that time. But now we could just sit. We're complete opposite parts of the world. It's evening over there. It's morning over here. And it just flows. It's fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, I remember someone would turn their camera on and I'd be like, what is this weirdo doing? Like having their camera on Zoom. So it's, yeah, definitely changed. So yeah, did that for a while. That was like the first sort of proper job, I would say, into the world, and being pretty independent as salespeople are. They kind of left to do their own thing, and you're judged on a number, and if you're not there, then
Yeah,
you
it's
know
all about targets, right? It's easy to see, are you performing or not? Are we hitting some
exactly.
KPIs? That's it's probably a simple role from that perspective, but it's one of the hardest roles to be great at because it
Yeah,
is challenging, right? So it's challenging to find new leads, opportunities. It's not as simple as it sounds, and
yeah,
cold calling is probably puts a tremor out in most people that's listening to this call. It's something I
yeah,
just don't want to do. I'm just not interested in. But if you know your shit, it's actually not that difficult. But
yeah,
it's more about knowing where you're coming from and value you can bring to the table. And yes,
yeah,
you're going to get hung up on. That's the reality. But then how do you convert a cold call into something a little bit more warmer and start, the conversation from there? That becomes some skill behind that too, right?
yeah. And it's even evolved now where it's like everything's done over Zoom. So you might cold call back in the day to go and book a meeting, and then you're face to face and it's shake the hand, look in the eye, like all the traditional sales, just acumen, right?
Yep.
How do you then replicate that over Zoom is like a new challenge that even I'm facing. It's like, how do you build a relationship over Zoom? In the US specifically, like it's a big country and everyone lives all throughout it. It's not like Australia where you're on the edges, right? And then most people are down the bottom right hand corner in Sydney and Melbourne. It's like the whole country's full of people in America. It's the same size roughly geographically, but the whole country's packed. So everything's done over Zoom. I did that, and then again I analyzed the job market, and I was like, what do I actually want to do? I went through a little bit of a, not a crisis, but like a, what do I want to do with my life type of question, and in that time in my life. And I found myself Googling and reading about startups just in my spare time. So
Must have been coming up in socials because they're just all over socials. Startup raise this, startup raise that. So yeah, you see a lot of that in the world of startup. That's the glory of it, but the reality of it's not all glory. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as people listening to the podcast would understand, as if they really sink their teeth into it. So, but tell me about startups. What fascinated you and drew you in?
it was those headlines. It was like, raised hundreds of millions of dollars at billions valuation, 5 years it took. It's like, wow, all right, that's pretty impressive. What other industry can do that? Like go and start a, mining business and do that in 5 years. Like it's pretty hard, right? Physical businesses.
Correct.
So the fact that software could scale I was just naturally interested in that at a young age. So then, funnily enough, as I start getting deeper into just research and whatever, I get a message on LinkedIn, and it said, Travis Kalanick wants to hire you. And I was like, who's Travis Kalanick? Why do I know that name? Then I just obviously quickly Googled it, and it's the guy that started Uber. So I was like, well, that's interesting. That's one of those recruiter messages where you go, I'm going to respond to that. So I responded to it. He'd started obviously his new business, which is Cloud Kitchens. And that was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it literally was, I think, March 2020 or April or something. So right at the beginning. And I took the call. I did a screening call. I went through a few different rounds of interviews and ended up being offered the job. And I was honestly a little bit worried because COVID had just started. Businesses.
Everyone was worried at that time, right? We're walking into the unknown.
Change roles into a startup, even though it's a very well-funded startup. I was like,
probably the most secure startup you could walk into, I would imagine, at that time.
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so. So that's exactly the calculation I did. Ended up taking the job. Best decision I ever made. Funnest job I've still ever had, I think, even though it was a grind. But we were selling. I was the first sales hire in Australia. We were selling to restaurants, so smaller ticket items compared to what I was used to of like the tens or hundreds of thousands in subscriptions or services. It went down to the thousands kind of thing, like very, very small ticket. But it was very fun. Different experience selling to SMB. Never done it before. I was usually mid-market or enterprise. What Australia calls mid-market or enterprise, which is very different to what America calls mid-market or enterprise. Just a different level. But had a lot of fun there, and then was promoted, managed the sales team. That was the first time I'd been a manager. That's another challenge we can talk about in people management. And that's then how I got over to LA. So they shipped me over to LA to then manage sales teams, the sales teams here.
Got it. Thanks for the background, man. It's heavily sales driven is where you've been focused predominantly, jumping into startups. Let's back into a bit of cold calling. What excites you about that world in terms of being able to create something for nothing? Because that's the fascination in cold calling, and it's a numbers game, right? So just giving it out to the audience. Is it still relevant in today's environment? What does it look like for you? Or are you shifting? I know you mentioned around sales technology and how we automate. What's happening in the space? Is cold calling still in the pile or in the toolkit, or is it becoming less and less more prominent?
It still is, for sure. And it's funny how things are cyclical and they flip. So in America, sales tech, marketing technology has been around for a while, more so than Australia. I think most of the sales tech and marketing guys focus on the US as one of their core markets because it represents the biggest opportunity. A lot of them do come out of Silicon Valley. Some are in Australia actually, like Smart Lead is a good example of an Australian sales tech business that's done very, very well. But the US is ahead. So what's happened is everyone has access to this technology, right? So they can send out automated LinkedIn campaigns, they can send out automated emails. I know in Australia, a lot of businesses are still sending emails manually, for an example. But cold calling, therefore, has become less common. I would say it's still everyone's cold calling. Don't get me wrong; it's still a thing, but everyone's also sending emails and everyone's also sending LinkedIn messages at scale. So when you cold call and you actually get onto someone, it's not like it's unique, but it is a little bit of an underserved channel right now. So funny you say like what's happening right now. I literally hired a guy today to start cold calling again for me. So then I'll have three primary channels of outreach, which email and LinkedIn have been how I've grown the business so far and how I've gotten pretty much every client other than referrals. But cold calling is a channel that I'm now implementing as a
I'm
as a
fascinated to hear the percentage of conversion from automation compared to referral. What's that
well,
roughly sit for you? Because you are really heavily invested in automation. Is it 20%, 50%? What comes from automation for you roughly?
yeah, I would say since I've started producing content as
Yep.
well, and I have a little bit of a digital presence, that's built a lot of trust.
Yep.
If someone checks out my profile, they might watch a couple of videos, a couple of things I've posted and spoken about. But in terms of raw numbers closes, I think my outbound is probably at like 30 to 40%
Still
cold.
pretty
And then
high. Yeah, it's high. Yeah. Because most
it's,
businesses that are early days, we start off referral, who they know, right? It's how do we crack into the unknown? And that's how you're going to scale. You need to get out of the referral local network, people you know, people they know to be able to actually scale a business. If you can
yeah,
get that moving into those sort of numbers, it enables you to get there.
yeah.
That's
And then it leads to more referrals, right? So you get one cold
correct. You
client
get
you
that.
do well, and that's exactly what happened for me. The first cold client I got
Yep.
literally was a six-figure contract.
Which is B2B, obviously. So B2B
Yeah.
sales, I'm assuming. It's not a big consumer buying that.
Yeah.
Is that over a 12-month period? What does that sort of look like in your world?
I think that was about 10 months.
Yeah, okay.
10 months.
All right. Just give
Started
people
with,
more context, yeah, in terms of
yeah,
what's
started with,
possible in cold calling or cold outbound reach and things.
yeah,
So from a business, you read about this. We need many channels to market or to get to customers. It's not just the one thing. And if you're just relying on referrals or you're just relying on LinkedIn, then there's probably you're missing out on the other piles. So you
yeah.
mentioned three there. So there's cold calling that you're doing, but are you cold calling off the back of emails and LinkedIn outreach? Is that how you're trying to warm them up a little bit?
Yeah, at least
Yeah.
so there's like four channels of warm up if we were to get them
Okay.
on a cold call and book a meeting. It would
Yeah.
be have they've probably gotten a LinkedIn message or at least a connection request. They might not have accepted it. They have definitely gotten an email, I would say. They may have then also seen my content and then they get a cold call. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
They've seen something and then we call them. Now, do they see it and remember it? Not sure. That's
Yep.
debatable,
It's
but at
tough.
least we've tried to get our name in front of them before we give them a call.
Yep.
So,
Okay. And when you
yes.
ring people on a cold calling perspective, how often do they remember you? It's 10%, 15%, 50%. What does it look like?
Yeah. Well, it's not me actually doing the cold call,
That's okay.
but yeah, I would say they may have seen the name probably 5 to 10% of the time,
Yeah,
maybe.
okay. Okay, but
It's
that
really
helps. Does that
it still,
help?
it still
Is that just,
helps.
yeah, I'm sure it would help. Okay. So let's talk about it a little bit. What does it mean to automate? So when people are sitting at home with they're in their early stage startup, they're looking to scale this business, they're looking at marketing, how they might get in front of people. First thing people generally go to is Facebook ads, or some sort of TikTok these days. Ads are quite cheap if you know what you're doing. In in terms of stepping out into email and LinkedIn campaigns, what's some technology that you're using? What can you bring to the table to support people in these activities?
Yeah. So in terms of tech stack, there's a few key players that I would always recommend, or some version of these to clients. First is data, everything you need. Obviously, contact data, whether it's email addresses, phone numbers, first name, last names, LinkedIn profiles, all that stuff. Apollo.io is pretty much the backbone of what I use for data. It's good data. It has 80% roughly of contacts in there that actually have email addresses. The other 20% you can get using different technologies, which we can talk about. It's cheap. Apollo is pretty cheap to use. It's not going to cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. It'll be more like, I think 60 is like their base license.
It's
So
reasonable, yeah, in terms of tech stack. And I find that sales technology in general is a high ticket price. I've noticed that when you look into this space.
So Apollo is probably one of them. It gets most of their data from LinkedIn. Obviously, have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account. We use that then to automate a lot of like data enrichment. There's a tool called clay.com, which isn't new, but it's probably the 2024 sales tech of the year if I had to give an award out. It got a lot of hype for good reason. It's just a very good tool. And you can enrich a lot of data. You can connect. It's basically a really good UI, very, very logical the way it's structured. And then it connects to everything else through APIs. So it'll connect to an Apollo. It has an Apollo connection. It'll connect to another tool to go and get mobile numbers. It'll connect to OpenAI. It'll connect to everything.
Okay,
So
brilliant.
it's like a workflow building enrichment
So
tool.
almost CMS or not quite?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Not,
Okay.
but it is by far like one of the most useful tools that I've got in my tech stack for sure. 100%. You can do email personalization at scale. You can do so many things in Clay. It's great. Yeah. So in terms of outreach, so I use a platform called Instantly for email automation campaigns. So that's automatically sending. From there, tracking, reporting. You can even do like replies handling in there if you like. And then for LinkedIn outreach, I use two tools right now, but I'm probably moving towards HeyReach because they have an open API versus Dripify is one that I've used historically, which is a great tool. They just don't have an API, so it's harder for me to use.
Got it. In terms of we want to integrate some tools together. There's a bit of information to unpack there. In terms of, you've mentioned a few pillars, right? So we're looking at some email automation, but you're really getting down to a call. And I think that's the intent, right? Getting in front of someone, having a conversation, but warming them up to that conversation as much as humanly possible. Because the complete cold, and most of them are going to be complete cold reality, is they probably don't remember what you've sent them. Our inboxes are quite full. What's in terms of that space, they're still potentially cold, but you're just trying to warm up as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
On the cold call, what's your intent? Is it book a meeting? What's the intent? Because a lot of people early stage sales probably might want to just jump in, talk about the product, but the reality is maybe it's what's the first yes that we need to get to. So what's the intent for you when you're jumping on a cold call?
Yeah, so cold call meaning going to book a meeting like over the phone. We use a platform called Kixi. It's just like a dialer type of thing. So click to dial. That intent is 100% to book a meeting. No one is going to buy my services or anything over the phone. That's just, unfortunately, it sucks. But
It'd be easy if they did. Yes, take my credit card. Let's go. Yeah.
Exactly. So 100% the intent there is to get a meeting. You need a decent hook to get someone interested. Luckily, I'm in the sales automation business, so growing your business is pretty universally accepted as a good thing.
It's generally a good hook because everyone is always looking at new revenue, new ways of business. So that is obviously a value add. Who do you target mostly? Is it founders? Is it sales guys? Who do you position yourself to talk to?
Yeah, so right now from a company standpoint, I really put the businesses we go after into two major buckets. First is early stage startups, so pre-seed through to Series A. Inside of the US or outside of the US, there might be slightly different messaging for each one of those. And then the second is Series B plus. So well-funded, they've got product market fit, now they're looking to scale. Versus the first bucket is more, we're still figuring it out, we need to lay the foundations, we're not 100% sure how to sell. And outside of the US, those founders that I do chat to in that first bucket, they are typically interested in, well, when we go to the US, that could be now, when we do go there, because it represents such a large market opportunity, how do we do it? And there's a million and one questions they ask themselves with that scary expansion. So at that point, we're pretty useful to them.
Let's talk about the how to get to the US, because I think a lot of people, our listeners, are mostly Oz, sitting here and thinking, okay, we're trying to prove a market and build a product in Oz. What does you getting to the US really look like? Having these particular structures in place for automation would obviously make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But getting to the US and selling to the US and selling to US customers is a completely different dynamic than selling in Oz in your networks and trying to expand and grow here. What's some of the key things that people need to think about when taking their product to the US? What does it look like? Competition is obviously a lot bigger. There's a lot more people there. What does this look like, feel like for someone that's really reaching into that?
First thing is just the human level, I think, of like, do you have the time to dedicate to the US properly? And it's kind of a crawl, walk, run approach. So you want to test out some things first in the US. Time zones is definitely a challenge. I work pretty much around the clock mostly because a lot of my clients are overseas in different time zones, so I have to. Also, the US has, 4 time zones to work across, or 3 time zones, I think, 4 time zones, 3 hours separate.
It's quite decent, similar to Oz, right? So there's a few different time zones across.
Yeah, but no one, like there are people in Western Australia. I'm not disregarding the Western Australia.
I hear what you're saying, right? Sorry, walked right into that. Yeah, the East Coast is where most people talk to, and then jumping over to Western Australia is like a different country in some context. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is
So
very
that's
different.
LA to Florida, right?
Yeah,
That's the same gap.
correct. Yep.
Yeah, first thing's just the human level. Do you have the the time to dedicate to it properly? And then you want to take a pretty structured approach in actually doing it. So first is can you get messaging to land in the US? Because just because you're a startup with no competition in Australia doesn't mean you won't have competition here or adjacent competition that could hinder your ability to grow.
Got it.
So first you need to understand, do you have message market fit? And you can test that across email, LinkedIn, cold calling. If you are, more B2C type stuff like Facebook and Instagram. I don't do any of that, so I'm not an expert in there, but the B2B stuff you can test.
It's the first time I've heard about message market fit. I like it. People talk a lot about product market fit in our world, but message market fit, it's fascinating because that is a reality, right? How are we communicating product? Are we actually cutting through? Are we hitting pain points that people are really going to stand up and listen? Especially in a cold call setting, are you really hitting the mark on a call? Because you've got to be quick and effective in that moment. And that's an interesting one. Message market fit, something that people think about in terms of how they're really cutting through.
Yeah, and it's a leading indicator, right? If you can't get people to join a call, then you don't know if you've got, if you can hold a meeting and get someone to buy and then test product market fit. So
Yes.
that's the first step, and you can probably get away with doing that on LinkedIn and email pretty quickly. Try a few different things, A/B test. The benefit I get is because we work with quite a lot of startups. I know what good looks like, and I know what bad looks like. So if you're getting a 2% conversion rate on LinkedIn messaging, I know it can be better, right? I've seen it be better.
What's the best you've seen? Because a lot of people are happy to get a response in LinkedIn sometimes. What's it look like in terms of what's best look like in your world?
Yeah, so we've had campaigns that get 25% reply rates.
Do you know the campaign that gets 25% more reply rates in our world? This is our podcast campaign. It's quite easy to get people to have a chat about their product and what they're doing in the space. But in terms of sales, never got anywhere near it. So that's a fascinating number, 25%.
Yeah, that's a big number for sure. That's why I've got campaigns that do that for myself and for clients as well. And then in terms of interest rates from that 25%, I'd say it's about 70%, and then down the funnel even more, you book that meeting, but then 25% people don't show up. So then or 20%.
You have a bit of that, right?
Yeah, it goes down, but still that top of funnel is definitely solid, especially if it's in a pretty automated fashion.
It's very solid in an automated fashion where you've hit 25 people out of 100 are replying, and how many are getting on a call?
70% ish around that.
It's reasonable, yeah. That's significant. Yeah, send out 100 messages and get 15 people on a call, give or take.
Yeah.
That's a significant number, and it's enough to fill the seat of a salesperson day to day, right? So it's significant. Okay.
So that's one of the first things. Then there's the whole conversation around product market fit, which is the next step, right? What is product market fit? I did a video breakdown on it, but just the cliff notes, I guess, is product market fit really is when you have a product that people don't shut up about and tell the world. So they love it, they tell everyone about it, you get referrals, they tell their siblings and parents and whatever, they just love it. But in B2B, the problem is that lag time. What if your sales cycle is 6 months? What if it's 12 months? What if it's 3 months? You have such a long time before you even get to case studies and testimonials and
Could be
referrals and
12
all this.
months, could be 18 months. It is, especially B2B high ticket items, it's difficult in that world. And you have to be persistent. You
Yeah.
might be barking up the wrong tree, but you don't know it for 12 months, which is a problem, right?
Yep, exactly. So then what are the leading indicators that show you might be on the right path? It's things like those conversion rates for messaging. It's things like does this person have one call with you and then take another call or refer you to the decision maker or get another stakeholder on a call? Like those are leading indicators where if you see a big drop off from the first meeting, you have a discovery call and then no one books again, that's an issue, right?
Yep, correct.
So optimizing across that funnel is something that you need to do, obviously anywhere, but when you expand to the US as well.
Well, one of the key things people can take away is understanding your numbers across. A funnel is a great point here because you can't optimize if you don't understand your numbers. How do you generally track this? Is it a CMS you're tracking this from? Are you integrated with different things to support this? What does it look like when you're using 4 or 5 tools to automate? How do you bring it back into, all right, here's one report. How are we actually going across the funnel?
So that's where things like Clay come pretty useful in integrating everything because Clay has APIs. You can do HTTP requests, all this stuff. It can integrate with a lot of tools, and the tech stack that I would recommend to people always takes that into account. So if they already have a CRM, if it's HubSpot, great. HubSpot integrates with like everything basically, but you just need to figure out a way to get all of your reports back into one system if you can. I use Airtable. Airtable's great. But it's like built for agencies kind of.
Yes.
And each individual tool has their own tracking as well. So you can always go back to the source of truth, I guess, like in the tool itself, but it's nice to have everything in a report if you can.
Yeah, getting it down to one because you can make that's where you got to make decisions, right? If the problem is at the time of the call, what are we doing wrong in the call? How do we A/B test that effectively? Because it is testing, gauging, getting feedback, and evolving and improving. That is what I find works well in the world of sales because you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of assumptions when you walk into this, and it's really just thinking you're testing assumptions and then shifting based on what the feedback is from the market. That's the reality until you keep incrementally improving. That's like anything in business, really, but especially in this space when you've got from message market fit, I like it, through to product market fit. And there was once on a podcast said, we're looking for a minimum lovable product because we want people to love it, talk about it, and effectively push that out and become our referrals for the business.
Yeah.
That's where we need to get the product to. In terms of, let's jump a little bit more. If I'm selling in Oz compared to US, there's a time zone difference. We've talked about that, right? So selling from Australia to the US is a difficult task for anyone. You're going to be up all night, late hours, evenings, mornings. It's
Yeah.
quite difficult. Do you recommend people hire people over in the US, test the waters that way,
Yeah.
try it on their own? What do you recommend when people go down this path?
Yeah. So in my market, which is B2B SaaS mainly, you should be doing founder-led sales when entering a new market, I believe. So you should be on the phone. Now, does that mean on the Zoom? Does that mean you have to craft every message and build the automation campaigns and the top of the funnel yourself? No, it doesn't. You can outsource that part. You should hear what the US has to say about your questions, product, because you have the most information about your company and your product in your head. You'll be able to make the right decision. I would never outsource sales at the very, very beginning. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, you're going to lose sleep. Yes, your life will be affected. Do you want to expand that badly to the
Welcome to
US? Well,
startup, right?
unlucky. You chose to do it.
Correct. You did choose to do it.
Yeah.
It's great advice because being a founder and in business forever, I still control a lot of the sales process, especially we're mostly software consulting, got a couple of products that we friend around, but I sit in the front of most sales. And why that's important, why you said that, is you're having a conversation, you can understand and cut through what the challenges are for that customer, and you might find a gap that you have to solve for, and you can on the fly solve for that problem quite effectively because you know the product and background and what's required. So having a lot of detail around end to end, how we're building it, what the next direction is on the roadmap, there's
Yeah.
significant on that. If you bring somebody in that's fresh, they're starting on here's the reason why we're selling it, here's the problems we're solving, here's the core features, benefits, this is
Yeah.
what you need to dig in, this is what you've got to find out about the customer. They don't
Yeah.
have the depth and breadth and knowledge behind them to be able to convert someone that's here that's got a gap here and they don't know how to close the gap.
Yeah.
And until you really unpack that and be able to educate and really solve for those early stage, I agree. Founder-led sales is the really only way forward for probably a long time.
Yeah.
Becomes more support, account support potentially from a founder perspective. I
Yeah.
found that works quite well, and with the ones that are startups are most successful from Oz especially.
Yeah, 100%. And you can make decisions on the fly too. Like even if it's something, if you're in like a negotiation and it's
Yeah.
discounting or whatever, it's
Yep.
like you can make that decision. A sales rep can't always make that decision, especially when you haven't built out a sales process to give them the
Yeah.
parameters of like, hey, you can do 10% here, but anything more than that, you have to come to me.
Yeah.
Well, if you're on that call, you can just make that decision.
You can make whatever decision you want. You might see this customer as a opening for an
Exactly.
industry, a market, and you
Yeah.
might build a feature for them. There's different ways you can skin it, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you a bit more flexibility in decision making for sure.
Yeah.
So on the calls, getting face to face with customers is a priority. At what point do they need to move over to the US? Because the reality is you probably need to
Yeah.
if you really start hitting the mark and expanding. Or do you think you can manage it from Oz? I think it's a fair way away. I haven't seen anyone successfully
Yeah.
do that yet.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Wait, was the question when do they need to move to the US or when should they
Yeah.
start expanding?
When do they need to move? Yeah. At
Uh,
what point?
yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't move until you've got a decent enough customer base to justify it. And you can see those leading indicators are like the conversion rates, how many meetings you're getting, all that stuff is ramping up to a point where you feel comfortable that the US is the market you're going to make money in. And then that might change depending on each person. Visa requirements is never easy as well, so like there are complications around that for sure.
Okay.
Australia is easier than other countries, just because of the treaties we have with America. But you should definitely have a few customers before making the move. I think whether that's $500,000 in sales or $1 million in ARR, that's really up to the founder. I think the other question that's pertinent is who's the first hire in America?
Fair.
CRO, VP of sales, account executive, or SDR. Like those are really the four major ones. Each one has their pros and cons. So VP, CRO type person probably isn't going to get their hands dirty and do the calling and set up the campaigns and all this stuff themselves. They want to hire people to go and do that, and they build the process. So that means you're not just hiring them, you're now hiring
Hiring
more
people
people
underneath them. Yes, correct.
to do it. So
Yeah.
it's a team. And AE, while they'll get their hands dirty, they might not have the ability to go and build the process, the tech stack, all this sort of stuff. That's never been their job, right? So you'll have to support from a time perspective and setting up the process. And if you know how to do that, great, but it's time on your hands as well. And then an SDR is pretty junior, so you better really handhold those people the whole way.
For everyone, let's expand on the acronyms. STR is,
Sales development representative. So
yeah, so just the
pretty much
BE.
the starting point of a sales rep.
Account executive for AE, and then you got your VP of sales, effectively is what you're referring to, right? So,
Yeah.
and there was one more you mentioned?
See, like chief revenue officer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, they're going to be top level and need people underneath them. You probably need all three, but in a
Yeah.
perfect world. So where do you start in your mind? What does it look like?
Well, I'm biased. You should use
Yeah,
an agency.
that's okay.
So honestly, the the amazing like tier one persona
Yeah,
would be someone who's like an account executive who has the knowledge, the skill, and just the hustle to really go and build out everything. But they're such a rare person to find that it's like hunting for a unicorn, right? It's just
okay.
very difficult to find that person. So
So ideal, find the unicorn or bring in some uh, agencies. Maybe have a. Could it be a VP of sales and an agency supporting them? Would that be a model
yeah,
potentially?
a
Yeah,
fractional, like a
yeah,
fractional type situation.
yeah,
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 that could be an option for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Unless you've got unlimited cash or you've got a decent budget or you've just raised a big round, like you can
Mm,
go get an AEVP of sales combo maybe. But that
yeah.
doesn't take away the fact that at least at the very, very beginning, it should be founder led sales and you should learn a whole bunch from the market before making that hiring decision.
Yeah, hiring without a process and confidence that you've got a funnel that you understand
Yeah.
is just burning cash, really.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
what happens a lot for
yeah.
sure.
Oh, you learn that over the journey. I've been in business for 17 years, and hiring people at the wrong time without process and expecting them to come in and do it, i.e., the unicorn,
You know,
is
yeah.
not happening in most cases, right? And then you just burning cash. Why aren't they generating X, Y, Z? The reality is they haven't got the support or the systems or the processes in place or the direction or anything in place to move them forward. So if you don't have that, don't hire. I agree. Create that first or get some support to create that because you'll just be burning cash. That's the reality. And it's really a testing phase, right? So that's when you're testing, finding is it product market fit, message market fit. I like it.
Yeah.
How does that really relate? And then we can understand. Okay, now we can bring people into the seats to execute on the process rather than create the
Yeah.
process and try and execute and fly the plane. That's generally the founder's job with a bit of support around them.
Yeah. 100%.
Halen, thank you for joining us on DevReady Podcast. It's been a great chat. Just talk about sales and how we might expand into the US and automation. There's a lot of content in this. If anyone wants to reach out and learn about you guys and at Scale, mate, and how you might support moving over into the US, I don't think that's a caveat. I don't think you need to be moving over to the US to get support from you guys. It's
Yeah.
more potentially testing the funnels to testing the messaging. How might they reach out and just get in contact?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best. Halen Yules. It's a very weird name. There's only one, I believe.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
you'll be able to find me there. I post like a whole bunch of content on there at least once or twice a day, every
Nice.
single week. So videos, just text as well. So there's a whole bunch on there.
Oh, brilliant. Hey, thank you for joining us, man. Really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure a lot of people get a lot out of this, and at least give them some things to really start sinking their teeth into and getting more understanding of this space. In the end, a lot of founders that we meet are just building product. They're not thinking about how we actually market and get this out there in a systematic way. And this is what we're
Yeah.
speaking out here. Everything's a process, and sales marketing is a process. And just getting it to that process that we can measure is important. So thanks for coming on and sharing just
And
the
that's
steps of how people might get there. Yeah,
and just one final thing now that you said
yeah,
that. That's the US mindset. Sell
yeah,
first, build later.
yeah. Which is complete opposite of what most people have, right? It's yeah, the
Yeah.
sell first, build later is a little bit scary for most people. It's like, what are we selling? How are we going to convert? What is it going to look like? But if you can prove that, then you're on your way. You can actually raise capital to build. It's different. So it just becomes a very different mindset. I'll get you on again for sure because I'm sure there's heaps we can discuss. But thanks again, man. Appreciate your time.
No worries. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Alan.